I never thought my life would turn into something that felt like a movie, full of secrets, confrontations, and revelations that shook not just me but my entire family. For most of my years, I was simply Stella Brooks, wife of Raphael, mother of Stephen and Ivan, grandmother to little Matthew, a woman who believed that family was the strongest fortress anyone could build. But that fortress, which I thought was unbreakable, began to show cracks the moment strange things started happening with my daughter-in-law. Araceli.it began one ordinary afternoon, the kind of day where the world feels calm and predictable. I was folding laundry in the living room when the phone rang. On the other end was my son Ivan, who worked as a pilot. His voice was low but urgent, carrying a weight that immediately unsettled me. "Mom," he said, almost whispering, "something impossible is happening. I think I just saw Araceli on my flight." I froze, the folded shirt slipping from my hands. "What are you saying, Ivan? That can't be. Araceli is here at home with Stephen. Are you sure?" "I'm not mistaken, Mom," he replied firmly. "She boarded the flight to France. I saw her passport, her face, everything. It was Araceli." A cold shiver ran through me. My mind raced. How could she be on a plane to France if she was supposed to be at home? Was it a coincidence? A woman who looked like her? Or was there something far darker beneath the surface? I tried to calm myself, but Ivan's certainty echoed in my ears like a warning bell. That evening, I couldn't concentrate on anything. I watched Araceli at dinner, sitting beside Stephen with that serene smile of hers, her hair tied back neatly, her laughter sounding sweet and natural. She looked calm, as if she hadn't just supposedly boarded a flight thousands of miles away. I studied her face carefully, searching for cracks, for signs of deceit, but she met my gaze with complete composure that I told myself maybe Ivan had been mistaken. Maybe stress or fatigue had blurred his vision. But deep inside, unease gnawed at me. Days passed and small things started to bother me. Sometimes Araceli seemed distant, distracted, like her mind was elsewhere. There were moments when her handwriting looked slightly different, or her tone shifted abruptly from tender to sharp. At first, I dismissed these as moods, the way people can change depending on the day. But Ivan's words haunted me. The real breaking point came one afternoon when Stephen came home late from work. I was in the kitchen preparing dinner, and Matthew, my little grandson, was drawing on the table. Suddenly, Araceli walked in, wearing a light blue dress, smiling as if everything in the world was perfect. She bent down to kiss Matthew, who looked up at her with innocent eyes and said, "Mommy, sometimes you're really nice, but other times you're so mean." "I don't like the mean mommy." Araceli froze, her smile faltering for a second before she laughed it off and hugged Matthew. But I felt something tighten inside me. Children don't invent things like that. They observe. They speak what they feel. That night, as I lay in bed, I remembered Ivan's phone call again. His words repeated in my head. "She's on my flight, not at home." I couldn't ignore it anymore. The next day I decided to follow my instincts. I told Stephen I was going to visit a friend, but instead, I traced Araceli's usual routine. She said she was going to the market, so I followed at a distance. My heart pounded as I saw her enter a quiet alley instead. There she met a man, Charles Thompson, a name I had heard whispered before but never with proof. I hid behind a wall, straining to listen, and what I heard shattered me. Charles called her honey, and she smiled at him with a tenderness I had never seen her show Stephen. My hands trembled. My son's wife was leading a double life, deceiving not just him but all of us. I returned home shaken. How could I confront this? Stephen loved her deeply. Matthew adored her. But the truth couldn't stay hidden forever. That evening I called Ivan. "Son, you were right. Something is terribly wrong. I saw her myself with another man." And she acted as though nothing was happening. Ivan was silent for a moment, then sighed heavily. "Mom, we need proof. We can't just accuse her without evidence. Bring her passport if you can. If she was on my flight, the stamps will prove it." I nodded, though fear gripped me. Taking her passport would be dangerous. But I knew it was the only way to reveal the truth. For days I watched her closely. Araceli was meticulous, careful, but one evening she carelessly left her purse on the sofa while attending to Matthew. My hand shook as I opened it and found her electronic passport. I slipped it out, heart pounding like a drum, and hid in my room. When I opened it, my eyes widened. There it was, the stamp of entry and exit from France, matching the exact date Ivan had called me. She couldn't have been at home and on that flight at the same time. The evidence was undeniable. My mind whirled. Why would she lie? Why would she use someone else, or perhaps force someone to take her place? The thought made me nauseous. The very next morning I decided to search for answers. Something inside me told me this wasn't just about betrayal. It was deeper. I went back to that same alley, hoping to see her again to find clues. And that's where I met Isadora Dutty first. I thought my eyes were deceiving me. Standing there in a simple dress was a young woman whose face looked identical to Araceli's. For a moment I was speechless, thinking perhaps Araceli had followed me. But no, this woman's demeanor was completely different. She looked humble, fragile, her hands roughened from work, her eyes full of sadness. "Are you Araceli?" I asked cautiously. She shook her head quickly. "No, ma'am. My name is Isadora." The resemblance was uncanny. My heart raced. "Who are you? Why do you look exactly like her?" Tears welled in her eyes. "Because she is my sister. My twin sister." Her words hit me like lightning. My knees felt weak and I leaned against the wall. Could it be true? Two sisters identical, living completely different lives. Isadora led me to her modest home, where her adoptive mother, Mrs. Jones, lay in bed, frail and pale. With trembling hands, Mrs. Jones confirmed the unthinkable truth. Many years ago, she had been a nurse at a small-town hospital. A poor family had given birth to twins, but they were so destitute they could only keep one child. They had planned to abandon the other. Mrs. Jones, unable to watch a newborn be discarded, had taken the baby and raised her as her own. That baby was Isadora. I sat frozen, clutching Mrs. Jones's hand, my breath shallow. The room spun around me. "So Araceli and Isadora, they're twin sisters?" "Yes," the woman whispered weakly. "I don't know much else. Only that they were from a poor nearby town." Isadora, her eyes filled with tears, handed me old hospital papers from a wooden dresser. When I saw the date of birth, my heart nearly stopped. It was identical to Araceli's. The truth was undeniable. They were twins. I looked at Isadora, who was weeping silently. "So Araceli used you," I said softly. "Yes," she whispered. "She made me pretend to be her at times. I didn't know why at first. She promised me she'd help my sick parents, that she'd give me money if I just filled in for her sometimes. I thought she was giving me a chance. But then I realized she was deceiving everyone, including her own family." I held her shoulders firmly. "From today, no one will take advantage of you anymore. I'll help you, but you must help me too. We need to bring the truth to light, for Stephen, for Matthew." She nodded, her tears falling freely. "I will help you. I don't want to live in lies anymore." That night I couldn't sleep. My mind replayed everything: the flight, the passport, the confrontation waiting ahead. I knew I had to face Araceli. I had to bring the truth before my family. The next day I called Ivan. "Tomorrow night, come home. Bring the passport copy. It's time to expose everything." "Are you sure, Mom?" he asked. "Yes," I said, my voice firm despite the storm in my chest. "It ends tomorrow." I spent the following day preparing a family dinner, but not to celebrate. It was a stage, a place where everything would be revealed. I set the table with a white cloth, candles, and Stephen's favorite dishes. As I chopped vegetables, I whispered to myself, "Be strong. Do this for Stephen. Do this for Matthew." When evening came, the family gathered. Stephen arrived, tired but smiling, surprised at the dinner spread. "What's the occasion, Mom?" "Just a family dinner," I replied calmly, hiding my trembling hands. Araceli walked in, dressed elegantly, her smile charming yet slightly nervous. Matthew hugged me, his innocent eyes bright, unaware of the storm about to break. Then Ivan arrived, with Isadora walking behind him. The moment she entered, silence fell. Stephen's face drained of color. Matthew looked bewildered, and Araceli leapt to her feet in shock. "What is this, Mom? Who is she?" I stood, gripping the edge of the table, my voice steady but heavy with emotion. "This is the truth, Araceli. It's time to stop the lies. You and Isadora are twin sisters, and you've used her to deceive us all. Tell us why." The room erupted with gasps, accusations, and tears, and that was only the beginning. The days that followed my son's call were a blur of confusion, unease, and the gnawing sensation that reality itself had begun to twist in ways I could no longer rationalize. I kept replaying his words over and over again, his urgent tone, the disbelief in his voice as he swore that he had just seen his wife, my daughter-in-law, seated comfortably on his flight, when at that very moment I had spoken with her over the phone from home. Logic told me it was impossible, but the gut knows when something is wrong, and mine was screaming at me louder than ever before. I remember sitting at my kitchen table, staring at the cooling cup of tea before me, the room filled with silence broken only by the ticking of the wall clock. My hands trembled slightly as I tried to make sense of the impossible. If she had truly been on that plane, what did that mean about the person I had spoken to only minutes earlier? Could it have been someone else entirely? Or had she played me, manipulating me so thoroughly that she had orchestrated this cruel charade to shatter our trust? The thought of deception from within the family stung more than anything else. I had endured hardships, betrayals, and losses in life, but to imagine my own daughter-in-law weaving lies so thick that even her own husband could not discern them, that was a wound to my heart. Still, I could not let my emotions blind me. I needed clarity, I needed proof, and I needed to hold myself steady for the storm I knew was coming. That night sleep refused to grant me solace. Every creak of the house seemed amplified. Every shadow stretched long across my walls. I could not shake the sense that someone was watching, listening, waiting for me to slip. Memories from earlier days with my son's wife came flooding back. Moments when I had questioned her sudden disappearances, the way her explanations never quite matched the facts, the way she seemed to control the flow of information so subtly that no one dared challenge her. My son loved her blindly, and in his devotion he overlooked the red flags. But I couldn't. Not anymore. The next morning I forced myself to appear calm. My son called again after landing, and I could hear the strain in his voice. "Mom," he whispered, his voice barely steady. "She was on that flight. I swear to you." She looked me in the eye. She even smiled at me like nothing was wrong. But when I called her after landing, she acted confused, as if she had been at home all along. How is this possible? His words confirmed what I feared. This wasn't a mistake or a misunderstanding. Something much darker was at play. I reassured him, though my own voice betrayed the tremor of my nerves. "We'll figure this out, son. But you must be careful. Don't confront her yet. Let her believe you're unaware. Watch, listen, and gather every detail. If she's playing a dangerous game, we can't afford to make a single misstep." As I hung up, a chilling realization settled in. If she was bold enough to live this double life so brazenly, then what else was she capable of? And why? What was the end game? Money? Power? Control over my son's life? Or something even more sinister? The days stretched into weeks, each one carrying new fragments of unease. My daughter-in-law maintained her facade flawlessly, smiling, cooking, speaking gently, and playing the role of dutiful wife. Yet beneath that carefully painted mask, I began to see cracks. A misplaced receipt from a city she had sworn she'd never visited. Phone calls answered too quickly, as if she had rehearsed the responses in her head. The faint smell of perfume on her clothes that didn't belong to her usual brand. Each detail was small enough to be dismissed on its own, but together they formed a tapestry of deceit too elaborate to ignore. That I began documenting everything in a worn leather journal, times, dates, peculiar conversations, inconsistencies. It felt almost paranoid, but I knew I had to protect myself and my son. Too often victims of manipulation doubt their own instincts until it's too late. I would not allow myself to be silenced by gaslighting or false assurances. Then came the night when everything began to unravel. I awoke to the sound of hushed voices outside the house. My heart raced as I crept toward the window, careful not to make a sound. In the dim light of the porch I saw her, my daughter-in-law, speaking urgently to a man I did not recognize. He was tall, dressed in dark clothing, his features obscured by shadows. Their conversation was too muffled to hear, but the body language was unmistakable. They were conspiring. She handed him something small, which he quickly pocketed before disappearing into the night. She lingered a moment longer, glancing nervously over her shoulder, before slipping back inside as though nothing had happened. I froze in place, my mind whirling with possibilities. Who was that man? What had she given him? And most importantly, what danger did this pose to my son and me? I barely slept that night, and when dawn arrived, I made a decision that changed everything. I could no longer keep silent. I had to dig deeper, even if it meant putting myself in harm's way. With trembling hands, I contacted an old friend of mine, a retired detective who had once helped me years ago with a family dispute. His name was Richard, and though time had grayed his hair and slowed his step, his mind remained sharp as ever. "Tell me everything," he said firmly when I met him in a quiet cafe, the hum of morning conversations masking our words. I laid out every detail, the conflicting appearances, the secret meetings, the inconsistencies that haunted me day and night. He listened intently, his eyes narrowing as I spoke. When I finished, he leaned back in his chair, stroking his chin thoughtfully. "This isn't the work of someone careless," he said finally. "Your daughter-in-law is methodical, calculating. If your son saw her on that plane while she was supposedly at home, it means she's maintaining two separate lives, one for your family and one hidden in shadows. The question is, what ties those two lives together?" His words sent a shiver down my spine. Two separate lives. How long had she been weaving this web of deception? And how deep did it go? Richard advised me to stay cautious, to avoid confrontation, and to allow him some time to investigate. I agreed, though the thought of waiting gnawed at me. Days turned into weeks again, each one heavy with dread. My son, oblivious to the depth of the situation, grew increasingly anxious. He noticed her erratic behavior, the unexplained absences, the coldness that sometimes slipped through her mask. He confided in me late at night, his voice breaking with fear. "Mom, I don't know who she is anymore. I don't know if I can trust her." I wanted to tell him everything, to reveal the truth I had uncovered, but Richard's warning echoed in my mind. "Don't tip her off. If she knows you're onto her, she'll vanish or strike back harder." The breaking point came on a stormy evening. Rain battered the windows as thunder rolled across the sky. I was alone in the house when I heard the creak of the back door. My heart leapt into my throat. Slowly, I grabbed the heavy candlestick from the mantel and tiptoed toward the sound. The shadows in the kitchen stretched long and distorted, and there she was, my daughter-in-law, drenched from the rain, her face pale and wild-eyed. She hadn't expected me to be awake. For a moment, we stared at each other in silence. Then she whispered, almost to herself, "You weren't supposed to be here." The candlestick nearly slipped from my hand. What did she mean by that? What was she planning? Before I could speak, she darted past me, clutching a small bag to her chest, and vanished into the night once more. That was the moment I realized this was no longer just a family conflict. This was dangerous. Whatever secrets she was hiding, they threatened not just my son's marriage but the safety of everyone involved. And I knew with a bone-deep certainty that the storm had only just begun. The rain had subsided by the next morning, leaving behind a damp stillness that clung to the air and seemed to seep into my bones. The events of the night before replayed endlessly in my mind, her drenched figure slipping through the shadows, the words that had spilled from her lips. "You weren't supposed to be here." They echoed louder than the thunder had, striking deeper than the rain that battered the windows. That single sentence revealed more than any elaborate lie she had crafted in the past. It was a confession, unspoken yet undeniable, that she was hiding something so enormous it demanded secrecy above all else. I moved through the house as though in a daze, touching surfaces she had brushed past, staring at the back door she had fled through. The unease within me had sharpened into certainty. Whatever she was entangled in was dangerous, and my son and I were now unwilling participants in her dark narrative. I wanted answers, yet dread clamped around my heart, warning me that some truths are heavier than ignorance. Still, ignorance had already cost us too much. That morning I called Richard, my retired detective friend, my voice trembling despite my efforts to remain composed. "She was here last night," I whispered, glancing toward the closed curtains as though she might be lurking outside even now. "She said I wasn't supposed to be home. She ran out into the storm with a bag." "Richard, what does that mean?" There was a long pause before his steady voice came through the line. "It means, my friend, that you've just seen her other life bleed into yours. Whatever was in that bag, whatever she was protecting, is tied to the reason she's been living in shadows. We're close now, dangerously close. You need to stay vigilant." I agreed, though unease coiled in my stomach like a serpent. The words dangerously close haunted me all day. I could feel it in the way the house seemed to hum with unseen energy, in the way silence pressed down heavier than ever. That evening, my son returned home from another flight, exhaustion painted across his features. He dropped his bag by the door and collapsed into the chair across from me. "Mom," he murmured, running his hand through his hair. "I can't keep living like this." She looks at me like nothing's wrong, like she hasn't been lying to me for months. But I know. I saw her. I can't unsee it. My heart broke for him, for the innocence that had been torn from his love. I wanted to shield him, to erase the pain in his eyes, but I knew shielding him would only delay the inevitable. "Son," I said softly, "there are things happening that we don't yet understand. I need you to trust me. Don't confront her until the time is right. Please." He looked at me with confusion and frustration, but also with the bond we had built through years of trust. "You know something, don't you?" he asked. I hesitated, then nodded slightly. "I know enough to say that she isn't who we thought she was, and I know we must be careful. For your safety, for mine." He leaned back, closing his eyes as if the weight of the world had settled on his shoulders. "What have I done, Mom? What have I married into?" I had no answer, only silence heavy with sorrow. The following days unfolded like the slow tightening of a noose. I began noticing small disturbances around the house, objects slightly out of place, the faint sound of footsteps outside at night, the sensation of eyes on me when I pulled the curtains shut. It was as if her secret world was creeping into mine, erasing the thin line that had once kept them apart. Then came the letter. It arrived one afternoon, tucked neatly among the usual stack of bills and advertisements. The envelope bore no return address, only my name scrawled in hurried handwriting across the front. My pulse quickened as I tore it open, the paper crackling like fire in my hands. Inside was a single note, the words written in sharp, deliberate strokes. "Stop digging. You don't know what you're dealing with." The room seemed to spin as I read and reread the words. Someone knew. Someone was watching me, aware of my suspicions, aware of my quiet investigation with Richard. This was no coincidence. This was a warning, perhaps even a threat. I called Richard immediately, my voice quivering with urgency. "They know," I whispered. "They know I'm looking. I just got a letter." "Stay calm," he instructed, his voice a steady anchor in the storm of my fear. "That means we've struck a nerve. She's getting desperate. But it also means we're close to uncovering the truth. Keep that letter safe. I'll handle the rest." Despite his assurance, fear gnawed at me every waking moment. My daughter-in-law carried on with her charade, smiling sweetly, speaking gently, as though she were not the architect of chaos unraveling in our lives. But now every word from her lips felt laced with venom. Every glance held a shadow of menace. One evening, as we sat at the dinner table, she reached across to pour my son more water. Her sleeve slipped back, and for the briefest moment I saw a bruise darkening her wrist. My breath caught in my throat. She noticed my gaze and quickly tugged her sleeve down, forcing a smile. "Just a little accident," she said lightly, dismissing it as though it were nothing, but I knew better. That bruise wasn't from clumsiness. It was a mark of struggle, of entanglement in something darker. That night, as I lay awake listening to the wind whistle through the trees, I realized the depth of the danger we were in. My daughter-in-law was not just deceiving us for personal gain or amusement. She was entangled in something bigger, something that left marks on her skin and threats in my mailbox. And whether by choice or by force, she had dragged us into her secret war. The next morning, Richard called with news that chilled me to the bone. "I've found something," he said. "Your daughter-in-law has been traveling under 2 different identities. She has passports under 2 names, both valid, both recent. That's how she was on that plane while pretending to be home. She's leading a double life, and one of those lives is extremely dangerous." My hand tightened around the phone as his words sank in. 2 lives. 2 identities. My son had married a woman who was not just a liar, but someone who had constructed an entire alternate existence. "Who is she, Richard?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. "I don't know yet," he admitted. "But whoever she is, she's not the person you think. And if she's using false identities, it means she's hiding from something, or someone." The revelation struck me harder than I expected. It wasn't just betrayal anymore. It was fear. Fear of the unknown. Fear of the enemy she might have. fear of the chaos she could unleash upon us. I realized then that the time for passive observation had ended. If I didn't act, if I didn't uncover the truth quickly, my son and I could be swallowed whole by the shadows she had brought into our lives, and so, with trembling hands but a resolute heart, I prepared myself for the confrontation I knew was inevitable. The mask she wore would soon crack, and when it did, I would be ready. The night after Richard revealed the truth about the 2 passports, I couldn't shake the weight pressing on my chest. 2 identities. 2 lives. My daughter-in-law was not just deceiving us. She was an entirely different person depending on the mask she chose to wear. That revelation alone should have broken me. But instead it awakened something deeper. Determination. I could no longer sit idle, trembling in fear of the unknown. My son's life, my family, my own sanity were at stake. I spent that night pacing the floor, replaying every conversation, every look, every inconsistency over the years. I saw her laughter that never reached her eyes, her sudden trips that never aligned with her explanations, the coldness that seeped into her demeanor when she thought no one was watching. How had we all been so blind? Love, I realized, was a powerful blinder. My son had been ensnared by her charm, and I had allowed my trust in his happiness to cloud my instincts. But no more. The next morning Richard called again. His voice was firm, edged with urgency.
I've tracked her movements.
She's been meeting with someone in the city. A man connected to a network I can't yet fully identify. Organized, secretive, and dangerous. She isn't just living a double life. She's working with people who know how to cover their tracks. Whatever she's doing, it's not small. It's deliberate. Calculated. My stomach churned. What does that mean for us? I asked. It means, he said grimly, that your safety and your son's safety are at risk. You need to be careful with every word, every action. If she suspects you know too much, she may not hesitate to silence you. The line went quiet for a moment as his words sank in. Silence thickened around me until I finally whispered, "What do we do now?" "We gather proof," Richard replied. "Enough to expose her. Enough to show your son the truth so he cannot deny it. But you must let me guide this. One wrong move could cost you everything." His warning rattled inside me like a caged animal. Proof. Evidence. The only way forward. Later that day, I sat across from my son, studying the exhaustion written across his face. He was unraveling, pulled apart by confusion and loyalty. He still clung to the hope that his wife was the woman he thought she was, yet the doubts gnawed at him relentlessly. "Son," I began gently, "sometimes the people we love most are the ones who hurt us the deepest. I need you to prepare yourself. The truth might not be what you want to hear, but it's what you need to see." He looked at me, eyes clouded with pain. "Mom, are you saying she's dangerous?" I hesitated, then nodded. "Yes. And until we know the full truth, you must tread carefully." He buried his face in his hands, and I wished I could shield him from the storm that was coming. But love cannot shield someone from betrayal. It only makes the wounds deeper. That night, Richard sent me photos. Grainy, taken from a distance, but clear enough to send chills down my spine. My daughter-in-law, standing in a shadowed alley, speaking with the same man I had glimpsed once outside my home. They exchanged something again. Small, discreet, intentional. Then she glanced over her shoulder with the wariness of someone who lived in constant fear of being caught. My heart pounded as I stared at those images. Proof. Not the full picture, but enough to know Richard was right. Enough to know my son needed to see. The next day I showed him the photos. His face drained of color, his hands shaking as he took the papers from me. "No," he whispered. "No, this can't be. That's not her. It can't be her." "It is," I said softly. "And you must face it." Tears brimmed in his eyes, his body trembling with the weight of betrayal. Why? Why would she do this? I had no answer, only silence thick with sorrow. Sometimes the why is less important than the truth itself, but as I watched him break, I felt a fierce surge of protection. If she thought she could manipulate us, control us, destroy the life we had built, she was gravely mistaken. I would not let her tear my son apart piece by piece. That evening, she returned home as though nothing had happened, humming softly as she set her bag down and kissed my son on the cheek. I watched him stiffen under her touch, watched the way his eyes darted to me for strength. But she noticed nothing, Or perhaps she was too confident in her charade to sense the shift in his demeanor. Dinner was a tense affair. Conversation stumbled over forced smiles, the clinking of silverware too loud in the silence. I studied her every move, every glance, searching for the cracks in her mask. She played her role flawlessly, but I could see it now, the subtle tension in her shoulders, the way her eyes flicked toward the clock as though she had somewhere else she needed to be later that night. When she retreated to their room, my son came to me, his face pale and haunted. "Mom," he whispered, "what do we do? I can't keep living this lie." I took his hand, gripping it tightly. "We wait for Richard's signal. When we have enough evidence, we confront her together. Until then, you must act as though nothing has changed. It's the only way to stay safe." The following week was a dance on the edge of a knife. She carried on with her act, but I could feel the cracks widening. Her absences grew longer, her explanations thinner. My son became distant, his heart breaking quietly in the shadows. And I, caught between fear and fury, clung to Richard's guidance like a lifeline. Then came the moment that changed everything. It was late in the evening when Richard called, his voice sharp with urgency. "I've uncovered her second identity. She's tied to a group under investigation for smuggling and fraud. She's not just living a double life, she's part of something criminal. And she's in deep." The world seemed to tilt beneath me. Smuggling. Fraud. My daughter-in-law was not merely deceitful, she was criminally entangled in a network that could destroy everything. "What do we do now?" I asked, my voice trembling. "Now," Richard said firmly, "we prepare to expose her. But you must be ready. When she realizes she may become dangerous." As I hung up the phone, dread and resolve battled within me. The mask she wore was about to shatter, and when it did, there would be no going back that night. I sat in the silence of my room, staring at the family photos lining the wall. My son's childhood smile, his eyes filled with innocence and hope. The life we had built together. The trust we had placed in the wrong person. And I swore to myself that no matter the cost, I would protect him. I would uncover the truth, confront the lies, and ensure that the woman who had woven herself into our family's heart would never have the power to destroy us again. The storm was no longer approaching. It was here. The days after Richard's revelation felt like walking on the thinnest sheet of ice. Every step a risk of plunging into the freezing waters beneath. My daughter-in-law carried on her performance as if nothing had changed, smiling, cooking, speaking sweetly when it suited her. But I could see through her now. I noticed the way she avoided certain topics, the way her eyes flickered with calculation whenever my son wasn't looking, the way her phone never left her hand for long. She thought she was in control. She thought we were still blind. But she didn't know that the veil had already been lifted and my son grew more distant, caught between heartbreak and rage. He avoided her touch, his smiles forced, his eyes shadowed. I could see the silent war within him, one half clinging desperately to the memory of the woman he loved, the other half facing the brutal reality of who she truly was. Every night, he came to me in whispered confessions, his voice breaking under the weight of betrayal. "Mom," he murmured one evening, "sometimes I just want to pretend none of this is real, that she's still the woman I thought she was. But then I see the photos. I remember what Richard said. And I know deep down, I know she's not who she pretends to be. I don't know how to live with that." I stroked his hair like I had when he was a boy, my heart aching for him. "You live by facing it," I whispered. "You face the truth, no matter how much it hurts. Because lies will eat you alive." But even as I spoke those words, I knew the confrontation would come sooner than either of us were ready for. Richard's updates grew sharper, more dangerous. He uncovered financial records, hidden accounts in foreign banks, deposits linked to smuggling operations, transactions far beyond the means of any ordinary life. My daughter-in-law was not dabbling on the edges of crime. She was deeply enmeshed in it, playing her role with precision. The night he brought me the documents, I stared at the numbers, the names, the undeniable proof. My hands trembled as I realized the enormity of what we faced. She wasn't just deceiving us, she was part of something vast, something ruthless. "Once we show this to your son," Richard said, his voice low, "there will be no denying it. But you must be careful. If she even suspects you've uncovered this, she may act first. People like her don't give up their secrets easily." His words echoed through me like a warning bell. Danger was no longer looming. It was already in the room with us, hidden behind her gentle smiles and soft words. That night, I sat across from her at dinner, studying the face that had so carefully worn the mask of daughter-in-law, wife, family. She spoke casually about errands, about friends, about nothing of consequence. But her eyes betrayed her, darting to the clock, lingering too long on her phone, narrowing slightly whenever she thought no one was watching. My son barely touched his food, his fork scraping against the plate with a tremor of suppressed anger. His silence was heavy, louder than words. She noticed, of course. She always noticed. "Is everything all right?" she asked sweetly, tilting her head in practiced concern. "Yes," he said shortly, his voice clipped. "Everything's fine." But it wasn't fine. It hadn't been fine for a long time, and the cracks were widening faster than either of us could contain them. That evening, long after she had gone to bed, my son came to me, his eyes wild with torment. "Mom, I can't keep doing this. I can't sit at the table with her, sleep in the same bed with her, knowing what I know. It's tearing me apart." I took his hands in mine. "Then we end it," I said firmly. "We gather the last of the evidence, and then we confront her together. She won't be able to deny the truth. And when she sees we're not afraid, her power over us will be gone." But even as I said the words, fear gnawed at the edges of my resolve. What would she do when cornered? How far would she go to protect her secrets? The answer came sooner than I expected. 3 nights later, I woke to the sound of hushed voices outside the window. My heart thudded as I crept toward the curtain and peeked through the narrow gap. There she was, my daughter-in-law, standing in the yard, phone pressed to her ear, her face tense and sharp in the moonlight. "I told you not to call me here," she hissed. "It's too dangerous. They're watching me. Yes, I'll deliver it soon, but you need to hold off. If they find out, everything will collapse. No, I don't care what happens to them. This is about survival." Her voice, cold and ruthless, sliced through me. No trace of the gentle woman my son believed he had married. Only calculation. Only survival. That I backed away from the window, my pulse racing. Richard was right. She wasn't just lying, she was plotting. And she was willing to sacrifice us all. The next morning I told Richard what I had overheard. His expression darkened. "It's worse than I thought," he muttered. "She's accelerating whatever plan she's part of. You need to stay vigilant. The moment she suspects you, she may lash out." I looked at him, my voice shaking. "What if she already knows we're onto her?" He hesitated, then said quietly, "Then the danger is even greater." The weight of those words pressed down on me all day. Every glance she cast my way, every smile, every casual touch on my son's arm. I wondered if it was real or if it was her way of measuring how much we knew. That evening, the tension finally snapped. My son confronted her, his voice trembling but firm. "Where were you last night?" he demanded. She froze, then forced a laugh. "What are you talking about? You weren't here," he said sharply. "You were outside talking to someone. Who was it?" Her mask slipped for just a moment, her eyes narrowing, her lips tightening. Then she smiled, smooth and cold. "You must have imagined it. Maybe you were dreaming." "I wasn't dreaming," he shouted, slamming his hand on the table. "Stop lying to me. I know you're hiding something. I know you're not who you say you are." The room went deathly silent. Her smile vanished, her eyes flashing with fury. For the first time, the mask fell away completely, and the woman who stood before us was not the wife or daughter-in-law we had known. She was a stranger, cold, dangerous, unrecognizable. "You don't know what you're talking about," she said in a low, menacing voice. "And if you're smart, you'll stop asking questions." My blood ran cold at the threat woven through her words. My son stared at her, heartbroken, devastated, but something inside him had shifted. He finally saw her for who she was. That night, when she finally left the room, he turned to me, tears streaming down his face. "Mom," he whispered, "she's gone. The woman I loved, she never existed." I pulled him into my arms, holding him as he sobbed. But my mind was already racing, already calculating. The mask was off. The confrontation had begun. And now there was no turning back. The storm had broken, and we were standing directly in its path. The house felt like it was holding its breath. Ever since the confrontation at the dinner table, silence had settled over everything like a heavy fog. My daughter-in-law moved about with sharp, clipped motions, her mask fractured but not entirely gone. She avoided my son's eyes, avoided mine too, but her presence carried a quiet threat, as if she were daring us to make the next move. We didn't have to wait long. 2 days later, Richard came to us with finality in his tone. "It's time," he said simply, placing a thick folder on the table. Inside were documents, photos, phone logs, recordings, undeniable proof of everything she had done and everyone she had conspired with. "Once this is in the right hands, she won't be able to slither away. But you need to be ready. She won't go quietly." My son sat with his head in his hands, torn between anguish and fury. "I married her," he whispered. "I trusted her with everything. And she was planning this all along. How could I have been so blind?" I touched his shoulder gently. "Blindness isn't weakness, my love. It's trust. And she abused it. That's on her, not you." But even as I comforted him, dread coiled inside me. Richard's words echoed in my mind. She wouldn't go quietly. And she didn't. That evening, she returned home later than usual. Her eyes flickered with suspicion when she saw us together in the living room. Documents spread across the table. For a moment, the silence stretched between us like a taut rope ready to snap. Then she stepped forward, her voice dripping with false sweetness. "What's this?" she asked, her gaze darting to the papers. My son stood slowly, his hands trembling but his voice steady. "It's the truth," he said. "Your truth. The one you've been hiding from me, from all of us. We know everything now. The lies, the money, the calls at night. It's over." Her smile froze, then shattered. Her eyes darkened as she let the mask drop entirely. "You think you know everything," she spat. "But you don't understand. You never did." "I understand enough," he shot back, anger giving him strength. "I understand that the woman I married never existed. I understand that you were planning to use me, use my family for your own gain. And I understand that you don't belong here anymore." The air vibrated with her rage. She took a step closer, her voice lowering to a venomous whisper. "You think you can throw me away? You think you can just erase me? You have no idea what I'm capable of." For the first time, I saw true fear in my son's eyes. Not fear of her, but fear of what she might do if cornered. He stood his ground, though, refusing to back down. "We'll take our chances," he said coldly. The next days blurred into chaos. She fought back. Not with fists but with manipulation. She spread lies about us to neighbors, twisted stories to mutual friends, tried to paint herself as the victim of a cruel and controlling family. But Richard was always one step ahead, dismantling her deceptions with hard evidence. Every lie she spun unraveled under the weight of the truth we carried. Finally, the confrontation moved from our home to the courtroom. She had pushed matters so far, tangled herself so deeply in her own schemes, that the law became the only place to resolve it. I will never forget the day we walked into that courtroom. The air was heavy with tension, every eye watching, waiting to see what would unfold. My son sat beside me, pale but resolute, clutching the folder of evidence like a lifeline. Richard stood behind us, calm, steady, ready to strike with precision when the time came. And then she entered, head held high, mask firmly in place once more. She wore grief like a costume, sorrow etched into her features, as though she were the betrayed one, the wounded wife wronged by a cruel husband and an interfering mother-in-law. Her voice cracked with practiced tremors as she spoke of love, of devotion, of the pain of being misunderstood. For a moment, I saw the crowd sway, pity flickering in their eyes. She was good, too good. If not for the evidence in our hands, even I might have doubted myself again. But then the judge entered, and the room shifted. His eyes scanned the courtroom, sharp and assessing. And when they fell on me, I saw something flicker there, recognition, shock. The world seemed to hold its breath. He froze just for a moment, as though he had seen a ghost, and I felt the weight of that gaze, the unspoken question hanging in the air. No one else seemed to notice, but I did. The judge knew me, or rather, he knew who I really was. And in that moment, I realized the secrets I had buried long ago were about to rise to the surface. But before that storm could break, Richard stepped forward, presenting the evidence with meticulous precision. One by one, the lies were stripped away. Phone records played aloud. Bank statements revealed. Photos projected for all to see. Her face, once composed and confident, crumbled with each revelation. "No!" she cried, her voice cracking, desperation bleeding through her mask. "This isn't true. They're framing me. They want to destroy me. But the evidence was undeniable. And the more she fought, the more tangled she became in her own web of deceit. My son sat rigid, tears in his eyes as he watched the truth laid bare. Every illusion shattered, every memory tainted. I wanted to hold him, to shield him from the pain, but this was a wound only truth could heal. When the final piece of evidence was revealed, the courtroom fell silent. The judge leaned forward, his face unreadable, his gaze lingering once more on me. Then he turned his attention to her. "Enough," he said firmly. "The evidence speaks for itself. The deception, the fraud, the betrayal, it is clear. This court will not tolerate such manipulation. Justice will be served." Her scream echoed through the chamber, raw and furious. She lunged, her mask shattered beyond repair, but the guards restrained her swiftly. My son flinched, the last remnants of love extinguished in that moment as they dragged her away. She spat her final words at us, venom dripping from every syllable. "You'll regret this. You don't know who you're dealing with." But her threats no longer held power. The truth had stripped her bare. The courtroom emptied slowly, whispers filling the air. My son sat beside me, hollow but free, the chains of her deception finally broken. He turned to me, his voice barely a whisper. "It's over, isn't it?" I nodded, tears slipping down my cheeks. "Yes, my love. It's over." But as I glanced once more at the judge, I knew another story was only beginning. His eyes still held that recognition, that question left unspoken. And deep in my heart I understood. The truth about her was finished, but the truth about me, about who I really was waiting just beyond the horizon, and that was a storm yet to come. The lies may have ended in that courtroom, but one question still lingers. Why did the judge freeze when he looked at me? What secret about my past does he know that no one else does? Tell me in the comments, what do you think he saw? Don't forget to like this video if this story gripped you, subscribe to Her Shattered Voices for more untold truths, and share your thoughts below. Your voice matters here. Every shattered piece tells a story.